It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woo-hooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host for Yoga Birth Babies, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Vijaya Krishnan. She is a certified professional midwife, the co-founder and director of Healthy Mother Sanctum Natural Birth Center, and the leading official Lamaze-certified childbirth educator in India. And we are speaking on a topic near and dear to my heart: how to make a slow labor progress. If you've been listening to the podcast or read any of my blogs or have ever met me, you probably know that my first labor was from when I first started to feel contractions to my child actually being born was about 42 hours. And as a doula, I have also attended many long labors, and they can be tricky, and there can be a lot involved in why they're slow and why they're just kind of moving at their own methodical pace, and what could cause that and ways to help resolve that. So I think this is great for anyone that's been through this to kind of wrap their head around it, anyone that's approaching birth, and of course, birth workers. So we have more and more tools to help our birthing people. All right, before we get to that, and it's a great conversation, I'm extremely excited. I do want to say, I do this over Skype, and Dr. Krishnan is in India, so maybe it's that, but there's a few little spots that are a little tricky, so bear with some of the sound quality. Our amazing sound technician, Eddie, definitely tried to do his best, but I do think there's a few little fuzzy spots, so I just wanted to give you the heads up. All right, before we get to that conversation, I'm so excited that I'm soon re-releasing Who's Afraid of the Pregnant Yogi. I've now run it twice live. I've collected that information, and I'm putting it together to release it on a self-guided course, so you can still get it and do it on your own time. And right now, because it'll be released soon, I'm moving it to a new platform. You can get on the wait list. So people are already on the wait list. So as soon as it comes out, maybe you'll get a little discount ahead of time if you jump on the wait list. But head over to prenatalyogacenter.com, or you can put in who's afraid the pregnant yogi.com, brings you to the same place, and jump into that online course. So I hope you enjoy. All right, enough of me talking. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to be speaking with Vijaya.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hi, Vijaya. How are you?
I'm doing really well, Deb. I'm so happy to be here on this podcast today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I found you because I was looking through the Midwifery Today conference, and I was looking at all the different topics. And when I saw how to make a slow labor progress, that spoke to me, because my first labor, from the first time I'm like, oh, I think this might be it, till baby coming out, was 42 hours. So I know what slow labor is about, and I've been a doula at slow labor, so I'm so excited to jump into this. So let's start with a little bit. Can you just tell me about yourself and how you got into birth work?
So I think, like a lot of us who get into birth work, it was because of my own birth experiences. My first sort of part of my life. I was a physical therapist. I still am. You cannot take the physical therapist out of someone. I have a doctorate in physical therapy. And yeah, it was so. But my own birth, the first one landed up being an emergency C-section. We were in the US. I was in New Hampshire at that point of time. And I was really active, running for the first many months of my pregnancy, and that was. But the long story short, it was a real emergency. I brought myself to my doctor's office because I didn't feel my baby move, and so it was one of those things that really kind of makes you understand that no matter how many plans you make, things happen sometimes and you just go with the flow. And that was the only way for my baby to be born safely at that point of time. And he gets to be 21 today because of that emergency C-section. Anyway, but that brought a lot of questions along with it. And while it was not traumatic in how many people talk about them not having had, oh, we have a cat there. So like it was not like trauma in the sense that my wishes were not heard or nothing of that sort, but it was on a physical level. There was definitely a trauma, and it took me a while. And the first month I really felt like I couldn't even connect with my baby because my body was recovering. And so when I wanted to have a second child, there was two things that happened. It was not that I felt anything that I 100% wanted a normal delivery or something like that. But it was a deep desire within me because as a woman, I wanted to experience what a natural birth felt like. And also the fact that I didn't want that recovery to be as long as it had been the last time. So these two things, and it was, I was 3 months pregnant and I brought myself to my doctor, whom I love dearly. And I said to her, I really want to try for a VBAC. And those days, and I'm talking of 18 and a half years ago, when when my second one was ready to be born, VBAC, for some reason at that point, was making a comeback into the US. So there was not as many hurdles as we now see, and also my doctor was very pro VBAC. So she said, the risk, do what you want to do. But she was very upfront with me about one thing, and she said, my protocols, I will not let you go beyond your due date. That's kind of like the cutoff for me. Other than that, we are free to try. So the only place where I could find good information at that point of time was Lamaze. So I came into Lamaze that way, and I did a little bit of research, and for whatever little online was available at that time, which was not a whole lot, I read the books and then kind of worked myself through it. And being a physio, like doing the little activities and the exercises and those things helped, but really mentally preparing myself for that, and had a fantastic VBAC. One of the most powerful moments of my life, really. And I know that this is echoed by a lot of the clients that I see, but amazing moments of life. And it was so much easier. And then my friend said to me, but she was due a few months later, and she wanted me to kind of help her through the process. And being that now I had two small children and teaching being one of my other passions, I ended up going into Lamaze. So I taught Lamaze classes, then we moved to India. And then I discovered a whole different world altogether, because here when I started work, I was also doing a piece of research with University of Massachusetts, and we were looking at women's experiences. And what came out really out of that research piece was that women literally had no information about what they were to expect. And even now, a lot of this is true, but even more so about 11 years ago or so, and really brought to me home that women here really did not have a choice. They did not even think they had a choice. There was a very typical hierarchical medical model of care, and when they would go into the doctor's office and come out, they would be clueless. They even did not know that it was okay for them to ask questions. So from that point on, we are located in Hyderabad, and I went around multiple hospitals, multi-specialty hospitals, gynec hospitals, talked about, would you want Lamaze classes? Because I literally, I knew that was the only place to start. Like, women had to be empowered with information. And the moment people would think, oh, Lamaze, okay, maybe some exercises, right? So, as long as it was about exercise and, breath work, it was okay, but there was no scope to talk about real, what are the healthy birth practices? How can a woman, sort of empower herself with good information and advocate for herself? And so when everything kind of felt that nothing would work, one of my son's pediatrician offered us a space, and it was a real small, like hardly like a 6x6, 8x8 sort of room, and I started teaching classes one-on-one. So that was in almost an end of 2006, 2007, and then one thing led to another, and the classes started getting. Initially, people didn't know what they were getting into. They were like, "Oh, we will go learn some breathing, right?" And then once they started getting into it, then it was more like there were bigger classes, but the last mile would sort of fail them. So they would go back into the same system, empower themselves with all this information, and a lot of my classes landed up with a 80 to 90% cesarean rates, which was heartbreaking for me, because they would say, we did what you said, we talked to our doctors, we did everything, we kind of, we knew what to do, but then when it came to the actual practice, it all went down, none of it worked, right? So then I sort of figured out that, I had to look for a space which at least had partially some of this kind of work that would be okay to, be followed through. And I landed up, now my partner is an OBGYN, a very sweet person. And she landed up, through somebody else's connection, I landed up meeting her. And she was very receptive to Lamaze. And she sort of said, where have you been? I've been looking for somebody who would do this kind of work. And even then, I was very skeptical, because I had kind of been through this almost for an year plus. And I said, you know what, I don't want to work for the hospital. I want to have an independent class, but I would like if some of these practices can be followed through. And so it took many years. And again, this can be a whole podcast in itself, so I don't want to take up so much time. So, but it took many years, and 3 to 4 years later, the first year, people started asking, where can we get this kind of birth? So I ended up asking her that, could I be a doula at her birth? If people changed care to her, could I be a doula? So even then, things would work great until I was in the room with them. But as soon as I would shift them to the labor room, it would all kind of go down the drain again. So then that didn't work. And I was at a point of time when there was a specifically very, very beautiful birth ongoing, but landed up being almost exactly the opposite at the end of it. And it broke my heart. And I said, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do this. We have tried everything and still it doesn't work. So then that's when my husband, who had a different career completely, said, if it's really your passion and if you want to do this, then let's kind of, do something more than what we are doing right now. And we talked to Dr. Jayanti and said, what about if we open a birth center right in the hospital? So we would access a collaborative model of care. So literally we came up with this model where we would have a small space that we rented out. We would be a midwife-owned, midwife-led birth center, but have access to all the emergency facilities. So if there was a need, we would transfer them down into her hospital, have the infrastructure, have the OBGYNs, and that's how we ended up opening up this small 2-room birth center inside of her hospital in 2008 and 2009. And so then we grew. It was still amazing that people still ask me, how were 2 maternity hospitals working under the same roof? And it's because people knew what they wanted and they were coming into it, not essentially knowing midwifery, because in India, midwifery is still very different. It's looked at with a different eye. It's almost like not an independent, fully valued profession in itself, although now government is making some efforts to recognize it. But people would come in wanting this natural birth, and then we sort of moved out into our own freestanding birth center in 2016, and that's where we have been at now.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Frame. Mother's Day is almost here. What are you getting her? Something that shows you care. Something that makes her feel loved. Something that won't stress you out. Something like the Skylight Frame. The Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. It's a touchscreen photo frame your whole family can upload photos to, from wherever they are in the world. It's a way to share with her all the moments that matter. It sets up in seconds. You can even make sure that it's already loaded with photos when your mom opens her Mother's Day gift. And her Skylight Frame can hold thousands of the treasured photos you share. It's an easy, heartfelt way for mom to stay connected with those who matter most. It really is the perfect gift. Now, as a special Mother's Day offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightframe.com/easy.
So that was quite the journey. Okay, that's amazing. And I like to hear that India is moving in a different direction, that you guys now have this. Because as you were telling the story, I was wondering, how is India taking, first of all, it's a huge country, but where you are they taking Lamaze in stride? So that's interesting.
Yes, they are. And I think literally because at the time when we started Lamaze word was just barely known, and even then not in the correct manner. Even now, many times you look at hospitals, Lamaze is used as a catch-all, and it's the trendy thing to do, but not really the whole philosophy of it. But we also began to understand very quickly that unless and until we trained other Lamaze educators and spread it across the country, it would not work. So we have been running the Lamaze accredited childbirth educator program since 2009, and almost 95% of the Lamaze educators today in India are the product of our program. So
that's great.
Single-handedly, we have kind of raised the profile of Lamaze education, the value of it, and value of making the woman and her voice heard and her choices heard. But then we have also simultaneously been able to raise the bar and talk about midwifery as an independent profession. Having said that, we only have 2 freestanding midwife-owned, midwife-led autonomous birth centers in such a large country like India.
In the whole country?
In the whole country. Yes. So that's that. And in my city of Telangana, my state of Telangana, the cesarean section rates in private hospitals top 75 to 80%. And in some districts of in the state, the cesarean section rates are 92%. So unless you have a baby actively falling out of you, so it's almost the fear psychosis is so much that the public has been told over and over again, boy, if you do this, it's a risk. Boy, if you cross the due date, it's a risk. And so at some point, this risk has become such a mentally ingrained phenomenon that now the society is beginning to reflect the risk back to us. And as soon as something is even slightly off, the parents or the grandparents or the cousins, they keep coming back and asking, are you sure it's not a risk? And so in that kind of situation, and with the kind of volumes of birth that a typical hospital sees, the doctor then says, well, if something goes wrong, I'm going to be blamed, and so let me go ahead. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. I'm not saying it's only in India. Worldwide, a lot of it is risk mitigation without really understanding the physiology of birth. So unless and until we are 360 degrees able to educate the public and then back to the doctors and let the medical profession also appreciate how beautiful physiological birth works, I think it's slow and easy strides, I guess, but it's a long way. I think it's something that we have to work towards.
I completely agree, which actually leads us into talking about slow labor, because we know, at least in the U.S., one of the top reasons for first-time parents having a cesarean is because of failure to progress. So, and that could just literally be, it's a slow labor. So let's talk about, how would you define a slow labor?
That's a very interesting question, Deb, because I feel like different people define slow labors very differently. I think the hospitals have a very cut and dry measure of slow labor, which is dilation, and dilation is not everything. We know that, right? So I think the part where I feel like what a slow labor means is if when we see the woman literally at the same place for many, many hours, whether it is measured by dilation, whether it is measured by effacement, whether it is measured by where the baby is at, or measured by the same frequency and same intensity of contractions, or even more valuable, if the mother is looking and feeling the same externally. Because external often mirrors the internal. You don't have to do 25 internal exams to know that, the labor is progressing or not progressing. You have been a doula and you are a doula, I guess. So you know it. You can see externally if the mom's going into the next stage or not. So to me, I think it's a combination of physical, emotional, psychological status. And if it seems like she's exactly the same many hours later, I would call that a slow labor.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it was back in the 1950s, there's something that Friedman's Curve was created, and it's based on such a small study. So a lot of hospitals still adhere to that idea of 1 centimeter per hour, and that doesn't fit everybody. So do you think pain medication should be taken into account when someone, a care provider is defining a labor as slow? Because studies have shown epidurals can affect things. What are your thoughts?
A lot, definitely a lot. Before we go into that, I do want to make one point though, because of the primary cesarean sections going up and up and up and up and up. In 2016, ACOG came up with guidelines which said a more broader range of guidelines to define what is a non-progressive labor and how much time to give a primary laboring mother. But there are also so many studies which are saying that the current generation's length of labor, and I think we can talk about this later when we talk about postures and what we do and how we generally are active or not, but the current generation's length of active labor has gone from 2.5 hours, not active labor. The whole labor process has increased from 2.5 hours extra in our preceding generation to 5.5 hours in the current generation. So that itself tells us that labors are lasting longer for a host of conditions. Also, another thing which had one more recent study is showing is that it's not a particular centimeter of dilation for more than 2 hours. So these are the two things that we have to take into account. And the last but not the least, of course, and I think a lot of people now know about this, but active labor is not until 6 centimeters. So that was the other big thing, because 4 centimeters was for that generation or when labors were progressing faster. But now we know that unless and until a woman is at 6 centimeters, let's not even call it active labor. That itself gives her a lot more time to labor in peace and perhaps and hopefully labor at home, because that's the whole point. Because once you get out of the house, getting out of the house is the first intervention that you will ever have. So if you do not do that, and if your care provider is on the same page as the laboring mom, and if she is allowed to be at home and encouraged to be at home and be there until 6 centimeters unless something is wrong, I think there is a much higher chance of labor progressing at a more normal variation. I won't call it normal speed, but I would call it a normal variation for that woman.
I like hearing that. And actually, I know one care provider that when a client comes in will say, until that client's at least 6 centimeters, even if that person's asking for an epidural, he'll say, you're doing really great work. Let's just try to turn that corner. You're doing great work, and really encouraging it. Because we know if pain medication is taken too early, it can start to make things deteriorate. So I love hearing you talk about, I actually wrote an article called 6 is the New 4, because we used to think that active labor started at 4. So now I like that we're talking about 6. So can someone in a more traditional birth setting avoid being categorized as failure to progress when in fact the birthing person could just be having a slow, steady labor? How can we deal with that?
Again, I think the first things I would say, which is fundamental to any laboring woman, is finding herself a care provider who is on the same philosophical level as she is. If we don't do that, whether it's a traditional setting or whether it's anywhere else, I think having that mind frame and having the dialogue with the care provider saying, what do you classify as a slow labor? What do you classify as a failure of labor to progress? I think can mitigate a lot of these things in labor, when ideally the woman should be kind of surrendering and not thinking and not having to advocate for herself. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing I think that can be done is for her to sort of make sure that she's not in the mind as to dilation alone. Like in her, whenever she is feeling like, again, coming back to that being at home, if you are feeling the urge to get to the hospital simply because your contractions are 5 minutes apart, you might land up in the hospital much sooner than you would want to. And again, in a traditional hospital type setting or a medical model type setting, that might land up having, unnecessary longer phases where she can be labeled as a failure of labor to progress. The third thing, though, I think she can do is to ask questions of her care provider. Say she's already in. She has done all this talking. She has done all this thinking, but now she is in, and she and a partner, if somebody tells that there is a failure of labor to progress, ask the questions. Is there no change? Like, is my dilation same? Is the baby down a little bit, perhaps? Is my cervix slightly forward instead of being back? Is my baby, I feel like I'm opening up a little bit more. I feel like the rhythm of this labor is picking up a little bit more. I think talking about those things sometimes puts the care provider on a thought process that, she's really working hard in this, and that if she's trying to do this, then can I give her a little bit more time? And the other thing that perhaps can be fairly easily done is to ask for intermittent monitoring and not the continuous monitoring, because we all know this, continuous monitoring does not improve outcomes, and it actually increases the chances of interventions and cesareans. So, and the ability to move and doing all of those other things are also lost. So if she can ask for that intermittent monitoring and be able to ask these smaller questions, so that she's not labeled. The moment you're labeled, your mind is in a different space altogether. We also know very clearly that the checking of the cervix can be different for different care providers. We know so much. A midwife checks, she says she's 5. That sometimes another midwife or another care provider checks, and they call it a 4. What does that do to the woman? She's saying, oh my God, now I'm going backwards. And it's really not. The cervix is a sphincter. And if you're not in that mind space and privacy and calm, if the person is not asking your permission, may I do this? I'll take my time. I really can only watch you. I don't need to just check you. How much that alters the cervical dilation. A lot.
Well, we also know it's not like someone goes in with a protractor. It's subjective. Exactly. And what one person has taught themselves to recognize as 4, someone else could say 5. I always tell my students and my clients, try to have the same person all the time. That way you have their understanding, their take of it. I love everything you're saying. I'm like, yes, I believe this. Yeah. So this is so exciting. All right. So what are some techniques that can be employed when someone is feeling like labor is slow to progress? And again, having been as a doula to these and having had my own, I was lucky that my midwife just kept saying over and over, it's like, it's just slow and methodical. You're moving along. I know had I been in a different setting, things would have been different. I happened to have a home birth. So and there was no pressure. There was no time clock. And then we used every technique you can imagine to adjust baby. But so what are some things someone can use if they're feeling that pressure for that they're being labeled as slow?
Yeah. So again, a bunch of things depending on situation to situation. But obviously, I think the first and foremost is having excellent freedom of movement. Walk, move, get out of the bed, change your position, maybe go onto your hands and knees. Oftentimes, I know that the woman whose labor will progress is one who will be very instinctively rocking, moving, and then a wave comes and she will drop to her knees. She doesn't care whether she's in the lobby, whether she's in the elevator, whether she's in the bathroom, and you know that those labors will oftentimes progress a lot better. So if she can do that, and then obviously if you are in a setting where you have ability to have water, like many times we often think of labor as things to do, but sometimes we forget that labor is about just being. I think if we can be, not do, that itself sometimes allows the labor to progress. I think we forget very often, especially when we are labeled as failure to progress. The tendency is to say, okay, let me squat, let me move, let me dance, let me do this. And yes, while all of that are helpful, if she can just dim the lights and let her body relax between contractions. So often we will see that the contractions will space out. Here she's having 4 minutes apart contractions. She's up and she's like, oh my God, I can't rest. And the doctor comes and says, perhaps you are just 5 centimeters, and you lose your thing. And then you say, okay, take a minute, take a deep breath, calm down. Let us shut off the lights, lie down for a minute and let your body relax. Let somebody maybe just do a little stroking. Let somebody rub your feet. If you like a little head massage, let's do that. And then suddenly the contractions space out, not because her labor is not strong anymore, but because her body is getting some much needed rest. And in the rest, we forget how often the cervix can open out. So I think it's a combination of doing and being. And if she can get into the tub, perhaps, if she has access to a tub, getting into the tub and relaxing over there for some time, that helps. If you don't have access to the tub, we say in a lot of our hospitals here, very, very few hospitals have a tub. We say even if you can take a bucket and a mug and, somebody pour water over you while you sit there, that can help you relax. Changing positions and perhaps having a little privacy, that allows your cervix to open up like nothing else. Be in the bathroom, just kind of close the door a little bit or semi-closed or whatever. If you're feeling, some women will feel claustrophobic and afraid that, they don't want to be left alone. Others are just fine. But even just half closing the door and being there for some time will allow the labor to progress. There are so many things, Penny Simkin calls it relaxation, rhythm, and ritual. And that is for a reason, because not only does it help the regular, normal variations of progressing labors, but it also helps to be in that yes, you need to kind of keep going at it without really thinking that how long will it last? Mm-hmm. Because very often you're told you're at 5, and we very recently had a VBAC mom. We do a lot of VBACs because we have such high cesarean rates, at any given point of time, sometimes 1/3 of all my moms are VBAC moms. And so that brings additional, like mental barriers as well, as you can well imagine. But we had this VBAC labor where she had pre-labor for about 3 consecutive nights. And it would be 12 hours of nice, strong contractions and 12 hours of complete rest. And she comes in the last day, and in her mind, she has been in labor for 80 hours. But it's not 80 hours. So there you go. My mindset is that I've been in labor for 80 hours, but you've been periodically in pre-labor. And then she's told you're 4 centimeters, right? Because she wants to be checked. I didn't care. I knew she was not that far along in labor. And she's like, in her mind, she's calculating, it's taken me 3 days to get to 4 centimeters. How much more longer is it going to take? So once you take the mental sort of thing out and say that I'm going to do this, whatever it takes, and everybody around you is, like you said in your labor, encouraging you, saying just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer. That kind of helps quite a bit. And many times I think people give up because of boredom.
Yeah. I think also tired. She's probably also very tired.
Tired and bored. But see, the thing is, she is tired. But we have to go back and look, because so many times as a midwife, I find this. Are you tired because you made yourself tired from the first contraction? Definitely there is an element of physical tiredness. No questions. Obviously the body is going through labor. Yeah. But in the early labor, if you have kept yourself awake, you've been excited,
Yes.
you're getting yourself tired unnecessarily.
Yes, you want. I always say
ignore
ignore labor for as long as you can, because that baby's not going to just fall out. And if it does, great. But yeah, exactly. I've seen that early on in my doula career. I remember showing up at someone's house and they were bouncing on the ball, and I'm like, oh, we're not in labor, but she was so excited, so we had to pivot the whole thing and let her, just rest. 'Cause I'm like, if you use all your bag of tricks too early, you're going to be kind of like you said, like bored and overwhelmed. And when you need them, they're not going to be there, and discouraged, because it's not that, her body couldn't, but sometimes you're like, oh, I've been doing this for 3 days. I'm just over it. So what are some reasons, and gosh, there's so many, and I know you have notes, so excited about this. What are some reasons that someone may have a slower labor? And I know there's, the emotional, the physical, everything. So I'm going to let you jump into that.
I think first and foremost is just the lack of privacy. I think in a typical hospital setting, typical medical settings, there is just no privacy.
Sarah Buckley talks about that a lot. Do you know her, Dr. Sarah Buckley? She talks a lot about private, respect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason for why labors don't progress as quickly. And making sure that the parents have in their bag of tricks how to create a private bubble around them, even whichever setting that they are in, I think is one of the most useful tools that you can hand over to a parent, whether it's a Lamaze class, whether it's any other kind of, birthing, childbirth education classes. That would be one of the biggest things that we would want the parents to do. How are the lights? Are they too bright? And very often, again, that's what you see. So now with people beginning to understand the physiology a little bit better, I think, there is these things, many hospitals are making sure that there is a lighters, that lights are dimmed and so on and so forth. But I think the primary thing is, especially if you look at the Indian context in our government hospitals, typical hospitals, all the lights are on. It's again as if the woman's going to just drop a baby sometime and everyone's standing there and watching, and how would you do one of the most private events of your life? And it's one of the most, most of us, that bodily, what shall we call, modesty is still
vulnerable.
Very vulnerable, right? And then suddenly you're supposed to be on this labor table and everyone's looking at you and everyone's shouting, something or the other, or because you have had an epidural or some kind of a medication that people walking in, walking out routinely to check in on you and so on and so forth. There is not a lot of quietness, I would say, even if you have the room that's a little bit darker. And before we go into it, I do want to say we also know that melatonin is a synergistic hormone to oxytocin, which is why one of the reasons that labor start very often in the middle of the night is because the oxytocin surges are kind of, made stronger and easier with the help of melatonin hormone. And that's the reason why you also need to have the kind of light, low light, dim lit room in your labor as well. But is what is happening in the hallway? Are you hearing doors banging? What's happening in the next room? We have all watched that episode of Friends where everyone comes and goes, and Jennifer is there saying, why is my labor not progressing? We have all watched that, right? And it's exactly that. You're seeing, hearing, doing so many things, and you're trying to make your labor theirs, whereas not making your labor your own and saying, what do I need to do? Sometimes too much talking. Sometimes morose faces, like the care provider puts the hand inside and shakes the head and says, oh no, enough to make the labor slow down. Who is coming and going? How often do we see that a particular person, whether it's a mom or a mom-in-law or an aunt, either comes in and the labor goes away, or goes away and the labor picks up, or vice versa, because they bring a different energy into the room? how often do we also see that if the same person, and of course we all know that like the as far as doulas are concerned, midwives are concerned, we need to be there for the entire length of it, but sometimes just being in that same energy sort of slows the labor down as well, because and it's so beneficial for me, especially like in the birth center, the way we run it. All our nurses are cross trained to provide labor support. So what they'll end up doing is they work on shifts. We are there all the time, going in, coming out, but they bring a fresh energy with them. So if a person particularly wants a particular nurse, or they have said that, what, can she just wait until I finish labor? Of course, we'll say, okay, can we talk to her and say, can you wait, please? Can you finish an additional duty? But otherwise, what we'll end up finding is each one of them, though they are all trained along the same lines to think, they bring their own. So, like one of my nurses is very, very good with making the moms eat and drink, right? One of the nurses is very good with talking to them and engaging them that, yeah, everything is great on a verbal level. One of them is very much like this, I can use my hands and make you feel heavenly, in labor. So you have different skill sets, and that very often can turn it around, in terms of how the labor progresses, whether it progresses very slowly or, can pick up with, with a little bit of extra changed energy in the room. And sometimes, even if you don't have that kind of a shift of energy, physically, just getting the mom out into the hallway or telling her, go get yourself a cup of coffee, or moving her into another area while you just spruce up the room, put away things, get the baby, and say, when she comes back in, see, now we have this room, it's all ready for the baby, gets her labor moving around, right? So lots of things. But I think very often we don't think of labor on all levels, spiritual, physical, emotional. Does she just need some calming music? Does she need some meditation? And even the medical model forgets that sometimes it's not just about the force of the contractions, but also being the contractions when she's in a resting phase, the rest, and be thankful, whether it's between transition and pushing, or even when the labor is going actively, but she needs a little bit of a break, because oftentimes slow labors can be in the physical realm, and perhaps we can talk about it once, maybe in the at a later stage. But if it's the physical part that is kind of, if the baby is not well aligned, if that's something of an issue, then there is the body itself will take a break, and we need to respect that.
I love that you honored the emotional part, because I think sometimes people just see, okay, there's the dilation and we're going slowly, and they don't take a step back and say, emotionally, what's going on with this person, and honoring, the lights, the disturbances, the anxiety that someone's feeling, hearing that, like you said, seeing someone get a vaginal exam, shaking their head, how discouraging that is. But then there can also be, and I'm sure as a physical therapist, you can go into this, sometimes it's actually the way the baby's positioned. So let's talk about how that affects things. But then if someone is just there with their partner, maybe a doula, maybe not doula, how would they understand the difference between this is baby position or this is an emotional wall? Does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense. And honestly, I think we cannot really put them into that thinking mindset either. But there are certain signs that we can definitely see. Labor that is physically something is off, very often will give physical signs as well. So if the baby is not well positioned, for example, the most common thing that we often hear is that posterior baby and the back pain coming in with every contraction. And that is essentially usually a longer, slower labor to progress. But not all posterior babies land up having long labor. Sometimes we think that this baby is beautifully positioned, comes out looking sunny side up, has caused nothing, of a difficult or a longer labor for the mom or the baby, So that, having said that, I think most of these physically, labors which are because of something that is either with mom's pelvis or the baby's positioning, oftentimes shows up in, say, the contractions are very quick space. They are very frequent in the early stages. So it might almost feel to the mom that she is, say, at 8 centimeters, but she's only 3. And the contractions are coming every 3 minutes apart. It's almost as if the body is trying to say, I need to work hard. I need to work strong to, get this baby into a better position, to move this baby down. But then the body realizes that it cannot continue like that because this baby needs to reposition. So then you oftentimes will see physically a speeding up, and then a sort of relaxation and longer, the frequency of the contractions are much more spaced out. You will see that very often. So that's one. The second thing which we'll often see is that instead of just having back pain or instead of just having the lower abdominal discomfort, oftentimes with every contraction, the mom will say that she is having either a one side flank pain or the other side flank pain. And this is very, very characteristic of slightly malpositioned or slightly asynclitic babies, where you find the pain radiating to a flank or the other. Very characteristic. Third thing that very often we see is that even at 3 or 4 centimeters, sometimes the mom will say that she's having an urge to push. And we are like, where is this urge to push coming from? But it is not an urge to push. The way the baby is positioned is causing the nerves to strike in a way that she's getting rectal pain. It is not rectal pressure. It is rectal pain, which is somewhat mimicking the pressure. And she's saying, well, I'm feeling something over there. I'm feeling in my rectum. I'm feeling the urge to push. And she really is not. So these are some very classic signs of labor where the frequency is there, and there is very different sorts of pain that the mom experiences.
I think that's really important for people to hear, so that if that's happening, they can recognize, okay, baby may be malpositioned or something might be going on with the birthing person's pelvis, and that don't just throw it out the window, like, oh, can't do it, but then try to relate of like, how can we move? What position do we have to go in to help adjust the pelvis or the baby? Because I think sometimes people just, again, get discouraged. It hurts so much. I feel like I have to push. I'm 3 centimeters and might give up on themselves.
Correct. Yes.
So is there anything a pregnant person can do proactively to help prevent a slow labor?
That's a loaded question.
I know.
I think we can do so much. So I think if we look at our grandmoms, and across the cultures, hardly anyone complained of long labors. I think that's something which we have to sort of think about. And there's 2 reasons for it. One was obviously they were all physically active, walking, their walk to the village well was often their exercise, and they would have a community of women whom they could talk to about their labors, which helped them not to be in that mental space of having fear. I really worry about our generation, especially in the context of my city, my state, how do we, having a cesarean or having an intervention has become a new normal. So, in the mind itself, we are sort of already giving up. So that's one. But physically, to go back into the physical component of it, I think doing regular stretching, making sure that, because a lot of us spend a lot of time at the desk and in a chair, even for someone like me who is fairly active, a good part of my day is spent between writing notes on my table and going to my, like the couch and doing the physical checkup, walking back to the table, making notes, doing a physical checkup, which is not a lot of activity. And if you look at the generation of, with the computers and the laptops and most people working in that situation, and we are not even sitting properly on our sits bones. We are oftentimes mostly like this, which not only causes the baby to be a bit malpositioned, but it also lands up causing lots of tightnesses in so many ligaments, which perhaps locks the pelvis in a certain manner, which also perhaps prevents the baby moving down and descending further. And I think those are things that can be mitigated. Yoga is one of the, it allows the woman to actually feel things. I always feel like your stretching and yoga is asking a question to your body rather than forcing it, so you're asking those questions. Where do I feel things? What can I stretch? How often can I stretch? And I think one of the best things that a yoga instructor can do is to allow the woman prenatally to feel those things and allow her to move in a way that she feels comfortable at her own rhythm, at her own space, and that translates into her feeling the same things in labor because she has felt those things and you have been facilitating her through that. And again, a doula or a partner can facilitate her. Remember, we did this, we can do this here as well. Similarly, breath work. I think, again, Lamaze, a big component of it used to be only breath work before we became a philosophy, and now we are talking about all these healthy birth practices. But I think breath work is huge because when you feel where the breath goes and how with the breath you can expand those tissues. And oftentimes when I sit, and even in meditation, I'm looking at it and I can literally feel my muscles sort of, I can give that intention along with my breath to open up the fibers. And I think that can help in the long run as well. Going for swimming. I think swimming takes off all the other, the gravitational effects of it, but you'll end up being able to relax into your body a little bit more. And also maybe even treading water can sometimes make your abdominal muscles work in a way that allows the baby to have some structure, especially if you're a second-time mom, a third-time mom, a fourth-time mom, or have had previous cesarean sections. I think walking and treading water allows your abdominals to work without really having to tighten it. And so it gives some structure to the baby. That works really well. Spinning babies, I think, is a great resource for parents. I think the daily essentials that they put out is excellent, whether it's balancing, whether it's inversions. And of course, talk to the care provider first before doing any inversions. This goes without saying. But if everything is okay, I think that balancing, a little inversion, a little bit of releasing all those tightnesses, I think are superb things to do.
I want to interject one little thing. So because we have a lot of yoga teachers listening. So when you're saying inversions, so when we're talking spinning babies, so especially yoga practitioners, yoga teachers, we're not talking headstand and handstand. We're talking specifically the inversions of spinning babies, which is more knees on a platform or couch, butt up and the chest down. So just want to clarify. I think a lot of yoga students will hear that like, oh, I can do, I'm 39 weeks. I should be doing handstand or headstand. We're going to say no. So I just wanted to jump in for that.
No, thank you. I think it's very important. And I think anybody who is teaching or trying to do it should do it the right way.
Yes.
I think go to the website, look at it. And if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. Find somebody who can help you through it and at least make sure that you're doing it right in the first place, And that first time, actually, I always find, even though we have many, our moms have gone through the yoga classes, they've gone through prenatal aerobics, but then I am finding some tightnesses. I will still tell them first time, do it with me. Then do it at home because we can make sure that they're doing it in the right manner, whether the angle is right, whether they are feeling comfortable in the first place. Of course, women with, high blood pressure and things like that should not be attempting all of those things. But I'm just thinking of your normal, healthy, low risk, vibrant mother. Those are things that can be handy, but it should be done knowing what they're doing. And remember, it's a small, it's not a long time. You're looking at a 30-second.
And it's about balance. Like what you said, it's
Exactly.
about creating balance because, where our bodies nowadays just are not balanced, too tight, too tight and weak, tight and strong. It's just not balanced. And it sounds like everything that you're saying is about creating balance, the swimming, finding tone, proper tone of the abs, everything's just about finding balance for baby to be hopefully better positioned, for the birthing person to feel more confident. I love everything you're saying.
And I think there is so much traditional wisdom to the old things that we did too. So like the squatting, and again, finding what kind of squat is comfortable. We know squatting improves your pelvic diameters by about 27 to 30%. But if you have never done it before, have not done it well, or if your body doesn't feel right, or if you're not feeling comfortable with your knees going into that position, I think finding that, whether it's can be a wall squat, whether it can be, like a towel rolled under your heels so that your calf muscles, if they are not, very in a lengthened position, they can still squat with that. I think prenatally finding those things are super helpful. In we do things like duck walking. Start 36 weeks, we get them into prenatal aerobics. Prenatal aerobics does a couple of things to me. It not only frees the body and helps them feel like, yes, I can do anything. It frees their mind. And very often they will say, if I can do this kind of aerobic activity, I'm sure I can do labor, So I think all these things put together, we have created this kind of continuum of wellness in our practice where the woman there is no mandatory things except Lamaze classes. I really feel like that puts the parents on even keel. They should know what we know and they should go into it without fear and they should really want to do it for themselves. But the rest of it, we really encourage them because I think yoga has its place. I think breathwork has its place. I think meditation has its place. How beautiful can you get a prenatal massage? Why not? That may be a treat, or even have your partner massage. We talk about this in comfort measures too, right? It's not just about a technique. While those techniques help, it's also about letting the partner know what makes the birthing person more comfortable and what does not make her comfortable, what kind of pressure she likes, what feels like she can lengthen and relax, what feels that she's contracted, all these things. Exploring those things, I think, make a very big difference once it comes to labor.
Oh, I love everything. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you for a tip or piece of advice for new and expectant parents. Well, hold on one second.
This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Calendar. Let's be real. Running a household can be exhausting and chaotic. And finding the perfect Mother's Day gift, it's not exactly a no-brainer. Until now. The Skylight Calendar is the best way to organize the family and give everyone, especially mom, some peace of mind to enjoy the things that matter most. The Skylight Calendar is a smart, touchscreen calendar that keeps track of and manages the chores, dinner planning, groceries, and to-dos for the whole family. The Skylight Calendar automatically syncs each family member's digital calendars and displays them all together on one color-coded touchscreen. It even doubles as a digital picture frame, so you can finally share all those special moments that are just sitting on your phone. As a limited-time offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Calendar when you go to skylightcal.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTCAL.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightcal.com/easy.
And we're back. All right, so what tip or piece of advice would you like to offer new or expectant parents?
Expectant parents, I think I would say do the best that you can. Find good books to read. Don't spend a lot of time on social media. I think it's great. There are so many groups doing so many good things and peer support is wonderful, but it can also lead you down this path of thinking that everything that is on the social media is true where it's not. I think I would definitely say to the expectant parent to sort of take what they want out of it, but not think that that's the only thing that's sort of the goalpost, and that's the only way to look at things. But I think most importantly, I would say find a good care provider. I keep repeating this, but Dr. Neil Shah, who has done so much work on, where the interventions and where the cesarean section rates are, I think his research says very clearly that the differences in interventions and cesarean sections depend upon the door you walk into, not because of your physical body or things that you have done or not done. So finding somebody, interviewing at least 3 people, putting some effort into it, and having that is one of the biggest things that I can tell you that will make a difference in the long run. Investing in some good physical activity. I think we've talked about this enough, but really investing some time and energy into some physical activity and some emotional sort of grounding. I think I call it's more of a grounding, like what do I feel? It's not sometimes, I think in this current generation, current world, and instant gratification, we want to outsource our body to somebody else and say, you take care of me. And it's not that. Care is what you give yourself between your visits to the care provider. And knowing that and having that grounding and spending some time, quiet time with your body and the baby, and this is perhaps the most, I would say incredible, but I think it's a hyperbole. I would say it's probably the best time that you're going to have before the baby comes. You're probably one of the healthiest people on the planet, and giving and being grateful in that, and being able to savor that, for lack of a better word, in this world of like run, I think is one of the best tips I can give to expectant parents, to new parents, I would say. Make a list of 3 and only 3 things that you cannot live without getting done. Because I think, again, as a new parent, you want everything. You're constantly questioning yourself. Am I doing things right? Am I doing things wrong? Is breastfeeding going well? Do I have enough milk? What can I do? And making it very simple and saying these 3 or 4 things I absolutely must have and must do in the house. Rest of it I can take peacefully and spend time sort of being in the moment with your baby will help you a long way, in your journey to new parenthood.
Oh, those are perfect. And where can people find you and your work?
We are on the web. Our website is www.healthy-mother.com. We have a very thriving Facebook presence. For all I say about don't be on social media, we are on social media. We try to put out good information there, and that is at facebook.com/healthymother. We are on Twitter at Healthy Mother and on Instagram at Sanctum Birth Center.
I'll make sure I have all those in the show notes. Well, I wanted to thank you so much. I truly enjoyed talking to you, partly because I agreed with 110% of everything you said. So this was just absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for your knowledge.
Thank you, Deb. This was an absolute delight being here. And thank you for enabling me for my first podcast. I'm really thrilled about it.
Well, I'm honored. Well, enjoy your day. Be well.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right. ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.